It was 2 a.m., and the house was silent except for the flicker of the TV and the muffled sounds of a horror movie playing. I was alone, down in the basement, curled up on the couch with a bowl of popcorn. The darkness surrounding me felt strangely comforting as the pale light of the screen flickered across the room, casting eerie shadows on the concrete walls. I had always loved watching scary movies in the dead of night. It was an experience unlike any other. But tonight, something felt off. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself it was just the movie getting to me. The tension was mounting on screen, just a typical slasher flick. But my mind kept drifting back to the shadows in the corners of the room. The basement always had an unsettling feeling, even though it was my favorite place to watch films. Maybe it was the low ceiling, or the way the floor creaked with every step, but tonight, it felt different. A sudden noise upstairs broke my concentration, something heavy, a thud against the floor. I froze, the movie's soundtrack blurring into the background. The noise came again, footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoing down from above. My heart began to race. No one was supposed to be home. My parents had gone away for the weekend, and I had the whole house to myself. I turned the volume down, straining to listen. The footsteps continued, slow, methodical, growing closer to the basement stairs. I held my breath, clutching the couch armrest, my eyes darting to the basement door. The handle rattled. I thought I must be imagining it, but then it rattled again, louder this time, as if someone was trying to force their way in. I sprang to my feet, my pulse pounding in my ears. I couldn't make out the shadow under the door, but I knew someone or something was on the other side. The footsteps stopped. Silence fell over the house like a heavy blanket, and for a moment, I convinced myself it was just the wind or my imagination. I crept toward the door, my hand hovering over the doorknob, but I couldn't bring myself to open it. The thought of seeing what or who was on the other side made my stomach churn. Then, the handle turned. My blood ran cold. I stumbled backward, heart racing, my legs shaking so badly I could hardly stand. The door creaked as it slowly pushed open, revealing nothing but pitch-black darkness on the other side. No footsteps, no movement, just the void. The door had opened by itself. I was certain of it, but there was no one there. I backed away, my mind spinning. The movie on the TV was still playing, but the suspenseful music seemed to mock my growing terror. I glanced around the room, searching for something, anything, to explain what was happening. Was it just my fear getting the best of me? Then, the basement lights flickered, and I saw something that made my blood freeze. In the corner of the basement, where I thought I had seen shadows before, a figure stood, tall, cloaked in darkness, its face hidden. I could feel its eyes on me, even though I couldn't see them. I tried to scream, but no sound came. I was paralyzed, unable to move as the figure inched closer. The lights flickered once more, and in that instant, it was gone, vanished, like it had never been there at all. The basement door slammed shut. I ran up the stairs, not daring to look back. My breath was ragged as I reached the top and bolted the door. But even as I stood there, panting and trembling, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever was in the basement wasn't finished with me. I stood frozen at the top of the stairs, my back pressed against the door as if that would somehow protect me. My heart was pounding in my chest, the sound of it echoing in my ears. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting just beyond the basement door, watching me, waiting for me to let my guard down. Minutes felt like hours as I tried to gather my thoughts. I should have called someone, but the phone seemed so far away, almost out of reach. The thought of walking past the basement door again made my stomach twist. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to leave, but something held me there, paralyzed by fear. I forced myself to take a deep breath, telling myself it was just my imagination, just the movie getting to me. It couldn't be real. But the door, the handle turning on its own, the figure in the corner, that wasn't something I could dismiss so easily. With shaking hands, I grabbed my phone and dialed my friend. The phone rang and rang. No answer. My thumb hovered over the screen, ready to hang up, when I heard it. A soft noise, like someone breathing, came from behind the door. I froze, every hair on my body standing up. It was followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, as if someone was walking toward me. No. This wasn't happening. I backed away, stumbling as I reached for the door handle. I needed to leave. I needed to get out of this house, away from whatever was tormenting me. Just as I turned to flee, the door to the basement creaked open. I didn't dare look. My body was moving on instinct now, running as fast as I could through the dark hallways, my feet pounding against the wooden floors. I reached the front door and fumbled with the lock, the sound of footsteps growing louder, closer. My breath came in ragged gasps as I finally got the door open and stepped into the cold night air. But even as I ran into the yard, I could feel it. I could feel it. The presence, the eyes, still watching me, even from outside. I turned back to look at the house. The lights inside flickered again, and for just a second, I saw the basement door wide open, a dark figure standing in the frame, its face obscured by shadow. I didn't wait to see any more. I ran, and I didn't stop until I reached my friend's house, miles away. The entire way, I could feel my heart still racing, the hairs on the back of my neck still standing on end. Even now, I can't shake the feeling that whatever was in the basement is still out there, waiting for me to come back. I stayed at my friend's house for the rest of the night, too shaken to even think about going back. But as the hours passed, my mind wouldn't let go of the images. The figure in the basement, the door opening on its own. It felt like something had followed me, as if the house had left a mark on me that wouldn't fade. I couldn't shake the thought that I hadn't truly escaped. The next morning, despite my better judgment, I found myself driving back to my house. I knew I had to go inside, had to figure out what had happened. Maybe I was just imagining things. Maybe there was a rational explanation for the sounds and the figure I saw. I told myself I was being foolish, letting fear take control. As I pulled into the driveway, everything seemed normal. The sun was up, the birds were chirping, and there was no sign of anything out of place. But the closer I got to the door, the heavier the air seemed to become. I had the distinct feeling that I was being watched. I glanced around, but there was nothing. When I opened the front door, the house was eerily quiet, too quiet. I stepped inside, my heart racing again. The smell of old wood and dust filled my nose. Everything was the same, but it felt wrong, as if something had shifted in the air, an unspoken presence that I couldn't ignore. I hesitated by the bottom of the stairs, my gaze flickering toward the basement door. It stood slightly ajar, just like it had been the night before. I felt an overwhelming urge to close it, to lock it away and forget about whatever happened. But then I heard it, a whisper, barely audible from the darkness below. "Come down." It was my voice, or at least it sounded like it, but it wasn't mine. It was hollow, distant, almost as if someone or something was mimicking me from deep within the basement. I froze, not daring to move. My legs felt like lead, as though they were refusing to obey. The whisper came again, this time clearer, louder. "Come down." I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was drawing me to that door, something powerful, almost magnetic. My hands trembled as I reached for the doorknob, my body moving on its own, against my will. The basement door creaked open wider, the dark abyss beneath me beckoning. I stepped inside, the chill of the air hitting me instantly. The basement was colder than it should have been, and the lights flickered in and out, casting long, distorted shadows across the walls. As I ventured further down, I noticed something new, something I hadn't seen before. The concrete floor was stained, not with dust or dirt, but with something darker, something red. It was as if someone or something had been dragged across the floor. Then I saw it, a shape, crouched in the corner, hidden in the darkness. At first I thought it was just my eyes playing tricks on me, but as I stepped closer, the figure shifted. It wasn't human. It was tall and hunched, its limbs impossibly long, twisted at unnatural angles. Its face was hidden in the shadow, but I could feel its eyes on me, cold and empty. And then it spoke, its voice a low, guttural rasp. "You shouldn't have come back." Before I could react, the lights flickered, and the figure lunged at me, a horrible scraping sound filling the air as its long fingers reached for my throat. The world went black. I don't know how long I was out. When I finally came to, I was lying on the basement floor, my head pounding. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth, and something else, something foul. I groaned, sitting up, my body sore from where I'd fallen. My heart still hammered in my chest as I scanned the basement, half expecting the figure to be right there, waiting for me. But the basement was empty. The door at the top of the stairs was shut, and the house felt eerily still. It was as if everything that had happened was just a nightmare. I stood shakily, rubbing my eyes, convinced I must have imagined it all. I took one last look at the corner where the creature had been, and there, on the wall, was a deep scratch, claw marks carved into the concrete. I could barely breathe. I ran up the stairs, not stopping to check behind me, barely touching the steps as I hurried to the front door. I needed to leave. I needed to get out. When I opened the door, a wave of relief washed over me. I was outside. I was safe. But as I stood in the yard, staring at the house, I heard it, a whisper, faint but unmistakable. "Come back." I froze, my blood running cold. It was my voice again, but this time I could tell it wasn't me. I turned to look at the basement window, the darkness inside staring back at me. Whatever was there, it hadn't left. And I knew then I would never be free of it. And this is the story of the basement creepypasta.